Good day, everyone. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about p-field handles, which is something that we've used already, but we haven't discussed much in depth. So p-field handles are one of the 4 data types in RTcmix, along with floats, strings, and lists. And p-field, I believe, stands for parameter field, though I might be wrong, but in any case, one way in which we could define handles is as being continuous data that offers dynamic control over instrument parameters. So 2 examples of p-field handles that we've used in previous occasions are MakeTable and makeLFO, although I don't think I explained makeLFO very well in the last tutorial, so I'll try to do a better job this time around. But what we are going to do in this tutorial is implement 5 different functions that deal with handles, and we will look at them one at a time. So the ones that we'll be looking at are MakeTable, makeLFO, makerandom, makefilter. No, I'm not spelling correctly. Makefilter and makeconverter. So let's start with MakeTable. MakeTable, as we've seen, is useful for things like creating envelopes using the line or curve table types, and also for wave specification using the WaveTable type. Now, there is a very important optional argument that MakeTable takes that we haven't used yet, and to demonstrate what this is, I'm going to say that FQ equals 440 plus MakeTable line, then table size, which is a variable that I created up here, and then I'm going to say 001 440. So what this should do in theory is dynamically change the frequency starting from 440 and go up to 880 hertz, so an octave above. But what happens if I run the script? So for some reason, we can't really hear what we were supposed to, and this is because by default, MakeTable normalizes the values we give it, in this case, this 0 and this 440. MakeTable is normalizing those values to numbers between 0 and 1, and in some circumstances to -1 and 1. But in this case, what we are getting is a gradual glissando from 440 up to 441 hertz, which is a change too small for us to hear. So to make this work, what we need to do is give it the no norm argument after the table type and before the table size. And what this does is guarantee that the values we specify won't be scaled down. So if I run the script, this should work as we are expecting. Awesome. Moving on, another table type that we've looked at is the WaveTable type. But we've been specifying the waveform only in terms of classical waveforms. So for instance, we've been able to ask for a triangle wave using the string tree, or asking for a sawtooth wave using the string saw. And also with the option of specifying how many of the first partials of that waveform we want to use. So if I said saw 8, I would be using the first 8 partials of that waveform. Now, there is another more open-ended way of specifying the waveform, and that is by using a list of amplitude values. So for instance, if I were to type, let's say, 1, minus 0.75, 0.5, and 0.25, the number of values, in this case 4 values, would be representing how many of the first partials of that wave I'm going to be using, and the actual values are going to represent the amplitude values for those partials. So if I play this, I should be getting a very different waveform than the one I had before. Now, in case you are wondering, any waveform you specify with MakeTable will have a harmonic spectrum. So using multi-wave would be a better option if you want to do something different. Now, instead of me typing these values manually, what I'm going to do is create a loop that will randomly populate those amplitude values for me. So I'm going to create a variable called WFAMPS. It's going to be an empty list, and I'm going to do a loop that goes like this. So a equals 0, a less than, let's say, a random number between 2 and 20, which would be the number of partials, and then a plus equals 1, then open loop and say that the 8th element of WFAMPS will be a random value between -1 and 1, and all I have to do is use this variable and pass it instead of these values. And so if I play this script, or rather every time I play the script, I'm going to get a different waveform. So let's hear it. Cool. Now let's move on to makeLFO. So makeLFO generates, as you might expect, a low frequency oscillator, meaning a wave with a frequency between 0 and around 20 Hertz, roughly speaking. And we can use this LFO to control different parameters, like for instance, the panning. So we could say that instead of pan equals 0.5, we can say pan equals makeLFO, then sine, irand 0, 2, and then 0 and 1. And so these 4 arguments that we have here are, the first one is the waveform of the LFO, then the second one is the frequency of the LFO, and the last 2 are the minimum and maximum amplitude values for the LFO. So if I run this script, what I should get is a back and forth between the right side and the left side. So let's hear this. Awesome. So hopefully that clarifies what makeLFO does. Now let's move on to new territory. And what we are going to do now will be pretty much focused on the frequency parameter in WaveTable. So instead of doing this, what we are going to do is create a new variable called rand rate. And this will be equal to 10. And then we're going to say that fq equals makerandom, then even as a string, then rand rate, and then 300 and 800. And so these 4 arguments, what they are is this. So the first one is the random type. In this case, we're using the even random type, meaning having an equal probability for all values within a given range to be generated. And then we have the rate, or the frequency at which those random values will be generated. And then we have 2 values which specify the range for those values. So what we're going to get here is a random frequency between 300 and 800 Hertz at a rate of 10 Hertz. And so if I run the script, that is what we should be getting. Great. Now, what if I wanted to be a little bit more specific and not just get any frequency within this range, but a specific set of frequencies? Well, what I could do is say pitch list, and this is going to be a list with different frequency values. So I'm going to use these. You can type whatever you want, and then I'm going to say fqtable equals let's say make table, then literal no norm, so that the values that I specify won't be scaled down, then table size again, and then I'm going to pass the pitch list variable. And what this new table type that I'm using here does is it allows us to create a list of values, but in the form of a table handle as opposed to a regular list. So you can think of this as converting this list that we created here in the form of a handle format. So what are we going to do with this? So what I'm going to do is map the output of makerandom onto the values of this MakeTable, which are these right here. And so the way I do that is by saying fq equals makeFilter, then fq constrain fq table, and then 1. Before I explain what this is though, I'm going to replace these values by saying min pitch list and then max pitch list. And what this does is simply detect or replace this by whatever is the minimum and maximum values on the list I gave it. So in this case, it's this one. Now, what do we have here? Well, makeFilter, what makeFilter is doing here is it's taking an input handle, in this case the fq variable, and it's approximating or constraining those values to the closest one available in the second table, in this case fq table. And this last argument, which has to be a number between 0 and 1, is the precision with which that approximation is made. So if I run the script, what I should get is only these frequencies randomly or ordered. So let's play this. Excellent. And what I'm going to do now is repeat the same process to randomly change octaves. So what I'm going to do is create a variable called octList, and we'll have the following elements, so 0.5, 1, and 2, which will be octave multipliers. And then I'm going to say oct equals makerandom, then even, rand rate, then min oct list, then max oct list, then oct table, make table, then literal, no norm, then table size, then oct list, then oct equals make filter, then we say oct, no, not in quotation marks, oct, then constrain, then oct table, then 1. And as the last thing, what I'm going to do is multiply these two by themselves. So fq equals fq times oct. And so if I play this, what we should get is these frequencies randomly changing octaves up and down. So let's hear it. Cool. And the last handle that we said we were going to use is makeconverter. And it's really easy to use and understand. So for the sake of demonstration, instead of specifying frequency values, what we're going to use is MIDI note values. And the first thing we have to do is, of course, change this to MIDI notes. So I'm going to say 60, 62, 64, 66, 60, 67, and 69, something cheesy, but that's okay. Then I'm going to change this to -12, 0, and 12 to change octaves. And what's next? And then we have to change this multiplication operator by an addition operator. And below this, I'm going to say fq equals makeconverter, then fq, and cps MIDI. So as you might be guessing, what I'm doing here is taking this input and specifying the type of conversion that I want to perform. So this is simply taking this output and converting from MIDI to cycles per second or hertz, and so that WaveTable can read it correctly, and so we can play this and hear these frequencies changing octaves up and down. So let's play it. Great. And the next thing I want to do before we get crazy with this is use makeFilter again to smooth out the frequency changes. So I'm going to type below here, I'm going to say fq equals makeFilter, then say fq smooth, then 25. So what this smooth filter type does is it creates interpolations or ramps between the values we are getting from this fq input handle, And the third argument, which has to be a number between 0 and 100, so a percentage, determines how quickly those values change, where the lower the number, the faster those changes are. So this is going to give us a pop music type of portamento between each note. So let's hear this. Great. And now that we've used all the handles that I listed at the beginning, let's make this sound a little bit more interesting with a loop, because why not? So I'm going to make a loop that will create copies of the same pattern with slight frequency deviation. So first thing I'm going to do is say seed equals trand 03000, and I'll explain what this is in a second. Then num copies equals 5, and then I'm going to say for c equals 0, c less than num copies, then c plus equals 1, then open curly braces, take all the stuff and indent it, and then close the loop with curly braces. And then what I'm going to do is pass this seed variable to the end of makerandom for the frequency. So I'm going to say seed. So what this is an optional argument that makerandom takes, which is the seed number. In other words, which random sequence or structure I would like to use. And this guarantees, I mean, even though I am randomly generating a seed, this guarantees that all the copies generated with this loop will have the same random structure. And the reason why I want this is because I want to be able to have a slight frequency deviations between them. So I'm going to say fq plus irand, and then I'm going to use the c variable that I have here to create greater frequency deviations with each repetition of the loop. And so this should be ready. So let's hear this. Excellent. And lastly, what we're going to do is include this loop inside another one to juxtapose independent voices with different frequency changes. So what I'm going to do is, well, first I'm going to indent this entire thing, and then I'm going to get rid of the start variable. I'm going to say num voices equals 5, then 4, v equals 0, v equals 0, v less than num voices, and then v plus equals 1, open curly braces, close curly braces. And before I play this, I just want to do something here to balance a little bit the amount of voices that I'll be using. So I'm going to divide this by something like, let's say 1.1 to the power of num voices. This is not perfect math, but it will help to keep things softer than they would be otherwise. So, and actually, let me change this to 5,000, and let's play it. ST is not declared. Let's see. Oh, I forgot to. No, I should have left this. So let's see. Amazing. So that seems like plenty of material for a single tutorial. And before we wrap up, there is a caveat that comes with using p-field handles that I would like to let you know about. And that is that you shouldn't use the same instance of a handle to control 2 or more parameters, because it creates a synchronization issue. So that's the reason why I had to include every single p-field handle inside the bottom loop. So that's something to be wary of as you start experimenting with p-field handles. And with that being said, feel free to play around with the script or write new ones using different handles. And don't forget to leave comments or questions if you have any, and see you all in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.